students, let me know, okay?
Any students?
Yes.
For Auntie? So do you have, how many students are you already taking? All the ones upstairs? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know, I've suffered from that. I suffered through 2 years of medical school.
Yeah.
The rest of us.
I was just looking for
Okay.
this.
No worries, thank you. Doing fine, you? You look like you're having a good day.
You trying this one?
No.
Power even and Good morning and welcome to the Sunday service. This morning, Subodha is going to give a Dhamma talk. Before that, he's going to lead the metta meditation also. And I just want to mention few things. Our computer monk Ratan is not here today. He went to the other temple for the Khatina ceremony. So this month is for the very much busy, all the monks, because we have to go to different temple for the different service. So next Sunday 27 I'm not going to be here, and the 3rd of the December, November also I'm not going to be here. We all are going different place. So, but service will go, everything will go here. So please come and join. So I just want to mention. So right now, Stephen, you can start the metta meditation.
All right, let's get into a comfortable position. Close our eyes and begin with a couple long, deep breaths. And now let's think thoughts of goodwill, loving kindness, metta, beginning with ourselves. This is a sincere wish, a wholesome desire for our true and lasting happiness. We might think to ourselves, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May I live with a heart and mind unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May I look after myself with ease. And then we extend our goodwill to our loved ones, our family, our friends, our teachers and guides, all those that we love, all those that we admire, all those that we respect. May they be happy. May they be peaceful. May they be free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May they live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May they look after themselves with ease. And then we do the same for our acquaintances, those that we don't know so well. May they also be happy, peaceful, free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May they also live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May they look after themselves with ease. And then we extend our goodwill, our metta, our loving kindness, even for those that we have difficulty getting along with, even those that we dislike, even those that may call us enemy. May they also be happy, peaceful, free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May they also live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May they also look after themselves with ease. And so it is in this spirit of admirable friendship with all beings that we extend our metta in all directions, the north, the east, the south, the west, above and below, out into infinity, to all sentient beings everywhere. May we all be happy. May we all be peaceful. May we all be free from stress and pain, free from suffering. May we all live with hearts and minds unburdened by greed, by aversion, by delusion. May we all look after ourselves with ease. And so with our hearts and minds uplifted with the metta that we have cultivated, let us now turn our attention to the breath, bringing mindfulness to the fore, ardent, alert, setting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. We settle our attention down into the body, somewhere where we feel the breath most easily. The tip of the nose, the chest, the stomach. Wherever it is, we bring our attention fully there. Mindfully we breathe in, we breathe out. Get to know the quality of the breath. Is the breath long, short, deep, shallow? And see if you can allow the body to breathe in a way that is especially gratifying, easeful, free of tension or tightness. And as you do so, spread your awareness around so that you are mindful of the whole body breathing in and breathing out. Set aside thoughts of the past. Set aside thoughts of the future. Set aside any restless or sleepy thoughts. Bring your attention fully here, time and time again. Really breathing each breath, fully present, with a mind that's like a steady flame, unwavering. A gentle, centered, but all-encompassing awareness of this body, this mind, this heart, connected through the breath. Continue to meditate in this way until you hear the bell.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Subodha, leading the Metta meditation. Right now, Subodha, you can start your Dhamma talk.
Thank you, Bhante. I pay homage to the Buddha. I pay homage to the Dhamma. I pay homage to the Sangha. I'm sure many of you already know that I've been spending, I don't know, maybe a year and a half studying Sanskrit. I still have about half a year left to go of 2 required years of Sanskrit study for my PhD. Over the course of this semester that began in August, I've been translating a story from the Mahabharata. It's the story of King Nala and his eventual queen in the story. And I have to say that, it's a bit of a painstaking process doing this job of translating. You have to go one word at a time and do the analysis and everything, at least to the standards of my professor, and he's a good professor. That's why he has us do it that way. But the story is unfolding very slowly for me. That means over the course of a couple months, we've only done a few verses. I think right now we're on verse 20. And when you read a story that slowly, a lot of the beats of the story start popping out to you a lot more than they otherwise would. And one of the things that I've learned, I think, is that human nature really hasn't changed all that much. We like to think that, we're very advanced, we're very different from other times and other places, but then you read some story that, could be extremely old, but probably wasn't compiled into the Mahabharata until probably, the 3rd century, BCE, something like that. But the way they talk about Nala and the way they talk about his princess, it's very much the way we would talk about action heroes, romance, characters in a story. It's all very, very similar, and if you read the accounts of, if you read the descriptions of Nala, it's very much like just over the top, like hyperbolic, truly. He's got like the body of Arnold Schwarzenegger and the mind of like Carl Sagan or something like that. He's like this just amazing man, and so much of the translation has been just how amazing this guy is. Tiger among men, like Indra himself. He's just so big and buff and strong and smart and better at everything than anyone all the time. He's the best archer, the best fighter. He's the king of this and that. He's like Indra. So many things like that. And his queen, I want to say her name is Damayanti. There's the reason why I'm confused is because the king of this other kingdom next to Nala's named all of his kids some different version of himself. So it's all Dhamma something or other, Dhammasada, Dhamma something like that. So I'm pretty sure it's Damayanti. But she is described very, very similarly on the opposite side. And again, it's very much, you can tell this was written by a guy, whoever wrote this story, because the kind of concern he has is very much what you would expect from like descriptions of beautiful women in the past and old Hollywood and everything. She's so beautiful that she has the arms of a goddess. Her eyes are long and shapely like the leaves of whatever, right? She's like a bolt of lightning in a storm cloud. And then you find other things like she churns the minds of the gods themselves. That's how attractive she is. Like even the gods are fretting over this girl. She's so beautiful. And probably the funniest thing that I ended up translating, because I couldn't believe it was there. This is a story that's over 2,000 years old. And what were the writers concerned about? She's also got a tiny waist, guys. Just so you know. We all needed to know. As the kids would say today, her waist was snatched or whatever, right? She's got this tiny little waist. And that's one of the things I had to translate. Like, not only is she beautiful, she got gray hair, great skin and everything, but, she's nice and skinny too. And that's one of the things that, that's in there. But this last week, I've been translating verses 17 through 20, where we learn that Nala has been so overcome with his desire for someone he's never met, by the way, because in the previous verses, they fall in love with each other just hearing about each other's qualities, which you've heard some of them yourself. Wouldn't you fall for them too, right? So they've fallen in love with each other just based off of hearsay, what their servants have told each other about each other. And Nala is now pacing around his castle, right? He's in his palace, and he's so overcome with desire for her that he ends up sneaking out to his royal gardens, and he's just thinking about her. And as he's in the forest, this goose comes in, this goose with golden wings comes in, and Nala snatches the goose, and the goose talks back. He goes, "Oh, hold on. If you let me go, I'll go to Damayanti and I'll tell her, like, I'll communicate, you know?" And that's another thing that we think is modern and new, but when you know it, he has a literal bird being his wingman. I can't make this stuff up. But here's this guy who, as far as this as we know so far in these verses in the story, this guy has everything. He has wealth, he has prestige, he has status, he's a king, he has his own kingdom, he has anything he could possibly want. And yet he's driven mad with desire over someone he's never even met, to the point where he's going to start taking advice from a goose, right? And so that, to me, really highlights how human nature hasn't really changed all that much. And even though this story was compiled sometime after the Buddha's parinibbana, the Buddha knew these things about human nature as well. That's why he taught what he taught, because he could see the way lust can overcome the mind, how greed and desire can overcome us so that we do really, really foolish and silly things, that we can drive ourselves crazy. Which is important to keep in mind, I think, because of the time of year that we're in. I was fortunate enough, I think, a few months ago to give a Dhamma talk right at the beginning of the Rains Retreat, which is oftentimes, for Buddhists all over the world, a time of dedicated study and practice. It's a period of time going all the way back to the Buddha, and perhaps even before him and some of the renunciant traditions, but certainly under his dispensation, we've had this practice of dedicated time to meditation, to studying the Dhamma, to being together in a community, in a padisa, right? And now we've come to the end of it. The full moon, I believe, was Wednesday or Thursday, and it marked the end of Vasa, the Rains Retreat. And so now you'll notice that we're all kind of all over the place, and we certainly will be for the next couple of weeks because of Katina, which is a time of celebrating the end of the rains, and it's a time of generosity. But I think for those of us who took Vasa as a time to really put some extra energy into our practice, it's a time now to reflect on the past few months and to think about what we've been doing in the practice and how we've been developing. Are we the kind of people that have used the time in a good way, in a skillful way, so that we've perhaps cooled some of this lust, some of this desire, so we're not acting as foolishly as this poor King Nala with his wingman, the golden goose? Or have we, just been frittering the time away? Earlier this morning, I was leading the meditation that we have every Sunday now. And one of the things I was pointing out was how oftentimes in the West, when we think about death contemplation as a part of the practice, we tend to get into like really macabre states because we hear the stories that there were certain types of renunciants that would meditate on corpses, literally sitting on them, that they would like be around the charnel grounds and be all like they'd cover their bodies in ash and stuff. And we tend to think that meditation on death is this tendency to want to like gross ourselves out with like the decay of the body, which really isn't how the Buddha taught death contemplation in the suttas. That kind of stuff, the grossness of the body, is actually meant to help us curb our lust. We see this body, and we have an attachment to it, to whatever extent we have an attachment to our own bodies, but we certainly have varying levels of a kind of craving and clinging to other bodies as well, and that kind of lustfulness. And it can be really helpful to realize that underneath the kind of outer exterior that we find really, really satisfying to look at and touch and smell and everything, there's some really gross stuff going on. You don't even have to think about death itself. You can just think about the functions of the body. I've shared this story several times, but it's one that to me was just so on the nose, where I was at a retreat at one point, and I'm supposed to be practicing, I'm supposed to be developing, supposed to be curbing all sorts of greed and aversion and delusion, and I'm doing my walking meditation, and there's a beautiful woman who's walking alongside me, and we keep kind of doing these turns around each other, and I keep looking at her and like, wow, she's so pretty. Whoa, look at her hair, it's all flowing. Her skirt, look, she's so pretty, right? I had my own kind of Dhammayanti just kind of wandering around. But the thing is, we were in this small shared space, and so eventually she ended up having to use the restroom like any one of us would do. And the way this building was structured is that the bathroom itself had pretty thin walls. And so this beautiful woman waltzes into the restroom while the rest of us are meditating very quietly, so we can hear everything. And the trumpeting, she might as well have had a goose in there with her too, right? The sounds and everything. It was a very, very important lesson for me, like, oh yeah, woof. She might look very pretty, but inside there's a lot of gross, literal shit all of us have, right? And that can be something that can remind us, like when we start craving and clinging too much for bodily form, is we can remind ourselves what form is filled with. And so that would be the kind of stuff that death might do, or rather when contemplating on foulness of the body, that's when we might look at the corpses. But in terms of death itself, the contemplation is much more important to the practice, which is this sense of we don't know how long we have to practice. And so when we come to the end of vasa, what we have to remember is that we don't know how many vasas we have in our future. This might have been our last one. We don't know. So what are we doing with the time? What are we doing with our energy? And so very immediately, the way the Buddha talks about it is that when you think about death at the end of your life, the time that you have, you're not thinking about it in terms of how many years you have, how many months you have, how many days you have, and not even how many minutes you have. The Buddha has you focus on how many breaths, to focus on this breath right now. Well, as you're breathing right now, you are alive. And so long as you're alive in this body, you have the ability to make change in yourself, to develop skillful qualities right here and right now. So we've come to the end of vasa. We might have used the time. We might have even forgotten that it was that time. But now we can reflect because we have this moment. You'll notice that any time I do the metta meditation that we start with, I always bring up greed, aversion, and delusion. They're a good place for us to focus on, because in the Pali canon, when we refer to those qualities, lobha, moha, and dosa, right, or dosa and moha, we refer to them as unwholesome roots. In Pali, it's akusala mula, and it literally translates into the roots of unskillfulness, which means that when we focus on these things, we can also think on their opposites, which would be the roots of skillfulness. And that's important to keep in mind. We have all of this stuff that we can study. You hear that I'm a PhD student in Buddhist studies, and you think like, wow, that's how much there is to study in Buddhism. There is. But in terms of our own practice, in terms of making change in our own lives, we often have to bring things more immediate. It's not just about the terms, the definitions, the concepts, but it's about our very lives that we're living, and not in a large scale, but right here in this present moment where we have true free will, the ability to act right here and right now, which we don't have in the past and we don't have in the future, we have right now. So we can focus on these unwholesome roots. In the Pali Canon, there's a place where the Buddha talks very strongly about these unwholesome roots. It's in the Iti Vuttaka 88, where he says, greed causes harm. Greed provokes the mind. People don't realize it as a danger born from within. A person, when greedy, doesn't know his own welfare. When greedy, doesn't see the Dhamma. overcome with greed, he's in the dark, blind. But when one, abandoning greed, feels no greed for what would merit greed, greed gets shed from him like a drop of water off a lotus leaf. Aversion causes harm. Aversion provokes the mind. People don't realize it is a danger born from within. A person, when aversive, doesn't know his own welfare. When aversive, doesn't see Dhamma. So, for one who abandons aversion, aversion drops away from him like a palm leaf from its stem. And he says very similarly of delusion, and he says that when one abandons delusion, feels no delusion, for what would merit delusion, he disperses all delusion as the rising of the sun, the dark. So when we talk about the kind of language that we find in our stories and what they say about human nature, they're all things that we see repeatedly again and again and again and again. Oftentimes when people talk about TVs and movies, they talk about tropes these days. You can even go to TV Tropes as a website, and it'll break down every single thing that you've seen in a story. You can take any show that you like and type it in, and you'll see all the different beats. Our own human story is very similar. We have those same beats within ourselves. And so we have these beats of greed, aversion, and delusion. But we also have their opposites in us as well. We have generosity, we have goodwill, and we have discernment and wisdom. And I think that sometimes when we read passages like that, we can take the wrong message in some cases where we feel like because these narratives are so ingrained in us the way that they are, especially these unwholesome narratives, that there is no easy way to break free of them. There is no way to abandon them. And when we read passages like that about how they can fall away like a drop of water, how they can fall away like a leaf, how they can be dispelled like darkness of the rising sun, and the Pali Canon puts it so easily, and then we end up feeling discouraged because it's like, well, it's never been like that for me. I tried to abandon greed. I tried to abandon aversion. I tried to abandon delusion. And it's not something that falls away. But when the Buddha uses those kinds of verses, he's talking about what it means for one who has already dispelled those things. That they can't even come to the mind again because they so easily slough off. Someone who has become an arahant really lives in the world detached from those things. They can't stick to them again. It's like when someone has a really fancy car and they put all that fancy special stuff on it so all the water beads away. That's exactly the same idea. Once the mind is free and safe, has true refuge in the Dhamma, all that stuff does bead right off. But in the meantime, we have a lot of work to do. And it's really satisfying, good work that we do. You know, a lot of times when people hear about this practice of vasa, they tend to feel like, oh, this means that, you know, for 3 months out of the year, Buddhists sign up for a Buddhist boot camp. And it really isn't the case. This work that we do is a loving kind of work, a gentle kind of work. The kind of work that when you go about it with the right attitude doesn't feel like work at all. But it isn't the kind of thing that just we become free of because we just know that they exist. I think one of the really damaging ideas that we have in the West is that we cut through greed, aversion, and delusion simply by just seeing that they're there, which I don't think is necessarily the case, because all of us, oftentimes, if we pay any attention to what's going on in our minds, we know, right? We might not know in a philosophical grand sense, but we know when we look inside. We see the things that are the nasty little parts of us that we hope no one else notices about us. No one else sees. No one else could possibly sniff out. The parts of ourselves that embarrass us. I know I have that. I mean, I've shared so many silly stories over the years, but I think of the little lies that I told, like in first grade, when I made up a lie that I was allergic to pumpkin, which is a good story to keep in mind because we're in October and pumpkin everything is happening right now. And I told the story not for any good reason. I was eating something and I was very convinced it had no pumpkin in it. And I was just like, there's no pumpkin in this. And this girl sitting next to me, she says, yeah, there is. What are you talking about? And I said, well, oh no, there couldn't be any pumpkin in this, you see, for I'm allergic to pumpkin. And if there were pumpkin in this, my throat would be closing up right now and I wouldn't be able to breathe. I made up this lie in first grade. And the girl next to me clearly panicked because there for sure was pumpkin in this little treat our teacher had made for us. She runs up to the teacher and it becomes a whole thing. The teacher talks to my parents, finds out that I'm for sure not allergic to anything, comes back in, and she plays it really, really slick because she comes back in and I don't even know that she's spoken to my mom. And she goes, well, Stephen, how are you feeling right now? You're allergic to pumpkin, yeah? I said, well, yeah, I feel pretty good, actually. She goes, like, well, you know, there is pumpkin in that, by the way. I said, really? Well, maybe I got over my allergy. I feel pretty okay right now, you know? And it became this thing. I went home and my mom was very upset with me that I would even do something like that. But we all have those kind of stories, all of us. There's some way that we have been subject to our greed, subject to our aversion, and subject to our delusion. And I think it's important that when we translate moha, we translate it as something more like delusion rather than ignorance. Because I think that's also part of the issue, is that if we think of these qualities as simply things that disappear like shadows once we know they're there, then we think the same way about our development of discernment. You know, it's like we're just ignorant. All we need to do is learn and then we have wisdom. And that's not really the case. We're deluded because it's not that we don't see, it's that we don't want to see. And so even the language of the Buddha in this is really important, because he says when one abandoning delusion feels no delusion, right? If it were simply ignorance, the lack of knowledge, then there would be no feeling involved. But we feel delusion in the sense that there are things about us and about the world and how we're interacting with the world that we don't want to see. It's in that way that we're deluded, right? One of the other translations for this term is not deluded, but stupid. We don't want to be stupid in how we conduct ourselves. One of the other reasons I think it's important to not view our work with these unwholesome roots as simply observing them is because the Buddha used very strong language when talking about them. He didn't act like, oh, well, these are just little things in the mind, you know, you just have to accept that they're there, you watch them, and just like, there they are, like little friends, right? Earlier in this passage, he defines them in a very different way. Monks, there are these three internal stains, internal enemies, internal foes, internal murderers, internal adversaries. And you might ask yourself, if the Buddha talks about them as murderers, what are they murdering? They're opposites. Our greed, if we allow it, murders our generosity. Our aversion, our anger, can murder our goodwill if we allow it. And our delusion can murder any wisdom or discernment we might be developing that we have inside of us. Even if it's a seed in need of water, it's there. So how do you stop a murderer? By protecting what they seek to kill. So that means that we protect our generosity, we protect our goodwill, and we protect our discernment. And if you're curious about how you protect those qualities in you, that's the entirety of the Eightfold Path, right? That's why we call what we do refuge. It's a place of safety. We are keeping ourselves safe in this practice, keeping our heart safe, our mind safe. And by changing how we think and how we act, we're also providing a measure of safety to others as well. We're protecting those skillful qualities in them, their skillful roots, our skillful roots and theirs. So now that we're at the end of Vasa and entering into this time of Katina, we have this ability to practice these things right now. This is typically a time of generosity, so think on your own life and how you can be generous. And it's not just monetarily, it's not just, with physical goods. There are many ways for us to be generous, even with our time, with our words. There are ways that we can practice our goodwill. Who can we be kind to? It's easy to be kind when we recognize how good it is to be kind. And our wisdom and discernment come from this very activity of reflecting on the mind and what it's doing, recognizing that our actions have power, real power, that our consequences have sometimes very long-term effects. So we should keep in mind the good that we can do, the power that we have. One of the things I love about Buddhism is that it's not fatalistic, it's not deterministic, it is empowering. So I would encourage all of us to reflect on that power. Recently I was invited to a screening of a movie. It was a biography of the Buddha, done by a different group of people. I really don't know their background, but I was quite alarmed with how they represented the Buddha in the story, because he himself was quite fatalistic. He didn't really go out of his way to do anything. The whole path was basically laid out for him, his progress from Siddhartha Gautama to the Buddha. And it wasn't like he saw the world and he saw what was going on and he wanted to be free. It's that someone told him, hey, you're the Buddha. And he's like, oh, really? Like, yeah, you should go be a monk. Oh, okay, I'll get on that, right? And it's the same thing as he approached his death. He ate some bad food, he was elderly, he's reclining there, and they're like, oh no, Buddha, you're dying. And he goes, like, what do you expect? It's fate, it's destiny, which was not his attitude. When other monks died, and when he was dying, he gave the same advice. Like, he would see someone, and it was usually an ananda, crying, and he'd be like, why are you crying? Well, so-and-so passed away. Or in his case, the Buddha's case, you're passing away. And the Buddha would say, like, okay, but the skillful things that I taught you, are they dying with me? And Ananda's like, well, no. Like, so all the lessons I gave you, do they leave when I leave? And he's like, well, no. It's like, well, then put what I've taught you into practice. Liberate yourself. Become an arahant. Be truly free. Be truly happy. And that was the lesson he gave. Not like, well, it's fate, it's whatever. No, we have power. That's what the Dhamma teaches us. We can truly change our lives and affect the lives of others as well. So that's what I would like us to reflect on. That's what I've got for today. Thank you very much for listening.
Yes, Stuart.
You say we're leaving Vasa and entering Atana, something like that?
Yeah.
Yes.
What's that mean?
That's meaning, Vasa meaning 3-month period retreat in Buddhist tradition. Because earlier in India, around August, September, October, June, July, September, around that time, lot of raining. Even you will see these days a lot of raining in India and Nepal, lot of flooding. So
It's the rainy season.
yeah, rainy season. So what the Buddha gave the advice to the monks. Basically, monks are doing the begging the food, going house by house, every day morning. So they have some trouble because of raining, flooding, lot of things. So other religious in that time, they decide not to go anywhere. They stay their own place. So then Buddha gave also advice for the monks to stay in the one place, and people will bring the food for the day. So then the both can do more good activities, like people more coming to temple, monks can teach them something to them, a lot of things they can do. So that is called Vasa, or the Vasana season. Vasa meaning raining, basically. Even here today we don't have raining here. All 3 months no raining, still we are doing the same retreat. So same thing, the Vasana times, monks cannot go anywhere. They have to stay one place. Okay, they can go maximum, they can go 5 days only. Before the 7 days, they have to come back to their temple. These days we practice it like that. If somebody go out of the more than 7 days, he is not in the retreat, he is out of retreat. He is not qualified to take any robe end of the rainy retreat time. So end of the rainy retreat time, all the people offering the robe, special robe for the monks who observe the Vasa in that temple. So that is we call Vasa. And another one, this is this is a special tradition in Buddhist society. So basically, if I met another monk somewhere, I just ask how many was. Before I do, I want to find out whether he is older than me. Okay, the way we are asking how many was, how many was, how many retreat you observe, not the your birthday or ID card looking. So sometimes that person is like maybe 70 years old, I'm like 25, 30 years old. Of course, I'm close to 70. So even, then the other monks is having, let's see, like a 2 verse or 3 verse, meaning 3 years after the high ordination. I have 5, maybe 6, 7 after the high ordination. So I am the older one. Then he's supposed to bow to me. He's supposed to respect to me. So that's why we ask how many was. So this is our tradition, to respect to the other person, not the looking the age, the looking how many retreat he observe. So that's the one we carrying still, that was retreat. Plus, those time everywhere in the Buddhist world, there are a lot of ceremonies going. Chanting, dana ceremony, people go to temple offering food, they enjoy in some way, some case, there so many things going. So that's a good thing. So you can go to sometimes the Theravada monks temple, Theravada temples, and they all do this service. Of course, Mahayana they do also. What's the meaning? They have a different one. They call special training period or something like. And that's also both parties, lay people and monks, they both are working together. So I remember when Reverend Karuna was here, so you guys have to come every Saturday, Sunday to temple.
Every Tuesday too.
Oh, every Tuesday too.
Yes, and sometimes Dr. Ratnasara would join us.
Yes.
And this for years, and every period it would have a different theme. Sometimes it would be a study of a sutra, and then one time for the entire summer we went temple hopping.
Yes. I remember.
We'd go to a different temple, and the monk at the temple would know we were coming, and we would have a study there. We did that for years and years here.
Yes. I think the Mahayana temple also, the Vietnamese or Chinese, yes. I think Nam can explain a little bit about how they're doing those days.
The Mahayana tradition of the grand retreat.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, similar, but a lot of mistake they call the ghost day or they call it Ulumbana. Ulumbana actually the annual retreat, the month retreat, is not the Halloween days for the Mahayana thing, but a lot of mistakes even because the Chinese they merged between the Taoist, that is Taoist tradition is the open gate, held gate. So a lot of people they call that, but after the Vesak is the full moon of May. The day after the Vesak, Mahayana monk tradition, they go for the rain retreat. And 3 months after that, exactly the full moon of the August. And the same time, in China, Taoist tradition, they had it before the Buddhists came to China. So those days is the day of the heaven gate, the hell gate open for the spirit free. So that's why they call that. But then they merged. That's why they made up the Mokulana, go to hell looking for the monk thing. So anyway, this is a good story, and everything is actually is good, but remember, is Urumbana is the ending retreat for the Mahayana monk tradition.
Yes.
Yes, well, listen, thank you very much for your talk today.
Oh.
I love the idea that human nature hasn't changed in the writing, because when I teach, the hour-long television writing, and they have to study scripts that, famous, scripts of the top television shows, the men are usually described by their qualities. Even today, the women are always described by how they look. And every woman in the class picks that up instantly. Instantly. So, as you said, nothing has changed in all those years in writing stories.
That's when they attracted to each other.
Yeah, so even with Nala, it's like he's smart, he's skilled, he's the best with the sword, with the bow and everything.
Blonde hair, blue eyes.
And she's got a tiny waist, like, yeah.
It's still there.
Yeah.
In some of these shows we really admire, I mean, it's changing now because, more women are writing the scripts. But it's very funny if you look at some of the older scripts.
Yeah.
And these are major characters they've described that way.
I know. It's really, I don't know, it's funny, but it's also damning. It reminds us how much work we have to do.
It's storytelling and who's telling the story.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
All right. So we will chant the page 4 and page 10. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranam gacchami, Dhammang saranam gacchami, Sanghang saranam gacchami. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Deluding passions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them all. Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to study them all. Buddha's way is supreme. I vow to attain it. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and the sick find health relief. When ye do konga pokap unyate nadang tu konga sange gai kong hai bada. When ye do konga do po thank you again. I think we have a tea and cookies. Next Sunday, 27th, I'm not going to be here. I think all the monks, Samsara, me, and Ratana, we all are going somewhere. And but we will do service, meditation, and service both. Ananda Coronado, he's going to give a Dhamma talk 27. So please come and join. That's it right now, the announcement. So by the power of the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, you all be well and happy.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.
So Subodha, you finished Mahabharata Nala Damayanti. It's a wonderful story.
It's a good story. It's a good. I'm not finished, but we're still translating.
That one in the movie also. The Indian
Yeah.
The Mahabharata movie.
Yeah, I've seen a few parts because I've seen whatever I can find on YouTube because it's hard to find anywhere else. So whatever little clips I can see on YouTube, I've watched. But yeah, I do like the stories.
I have something for the hymn. Oh, okay. I will do. I have it. So next week, 2 weeks you have
Half a year left of
also Sumana.
no, because I still have to do my dissertation.
Later.
Yeah.